What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so getting into Heroes in Crisis Part 3, what I want to do here is I want to kind of switch up how we would normally record this, which is to say normally we would go through the way the book's written and kind of call it a day. The issue with this is that the way that Tom King does this is this literally like the first page is Lagoon Boy, the second page is Wally West, the third page is like Booster Gold, and then it goes back to Lagoon Boy, then it goes back to Wally, then it goes back to Booster Gold. And so what it does is it would create all kinds of weird issues when we're trying to record this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to split it in segments because really it focuses on these three characters, on Wally, Booster, and Lagoon Boy. And the first person I want to focus on here is the segment about Lagoon Boy's character. Now, as he's going through here, he's basically being shot with a laser consistently. But remember, the nature of Sanctuary is that it's designed to be a place of healing, a place for people to kind of move on past whatever struggles they have and then go back to being a hero. You know, it's kind of like a rehab clinic to a degree, but more like a trauma clinic. Now, the important thing about this is that with Lagoon Boy seeking this out on himself, initially we didn't really know why this was happening, but then Tom King goes through and kind of gives us an explanation about Lagoon Boy and actually draws on former instances of his character. And so to sort of wind the clock back a little bit, you know, what Lagoon Boy tells us here is that as he's doing this, what he's doing is hearing the screams of various, you know, members of the Titans that he had fought alongside and who were severely injured in a variety of different ways. You know, for example, one of the characters, Power Boy, was injured. He hears his screams in his mind. He hears the screams of like a character named Barda. What this does is it kind of goes back to the origin of Lagoon Boy and then the attempts of DC to like branch off the Teen Titans title. Wind the clock back to 1998, there was a guy named Eric Larson who took over the Aquaman series. Now, Eric Larson's Aquaman run was written after Peter David, and a lot of Aquaman fans hated the Eric Larson run. But in reality, it wasn't really Eric Larson's fault, right? Like it was more of like an editorial mandate, which is to say that under Peter David, the writing of Aquaman was pretty dark and it was pretty heavy-handed. And so coming out of that, it was make Aquaman lighter. And the result was that in a lot of ways, the run of Eric Larson came off as kind of campy. Now, Lagoon Boy was introduced in issue number 50, and the idea was to form a group that was called the Surface Lovers. I think it was what it was called. But basically it was Lagoon Boy and a couple other people who essentially took to kind of like going against Atlantean ways and then just kind of being more of like a bridge, kind of serving the role as Aquaman, where they were kind of like a bridge between the surface world and Atlantis. Of course, didn't take too well with the Atlantean people, but for Lagoon Boy himself, he actually has no origin in DC Comics. As far as I'm aware, he was just there one day. And the reason why no origin was given, if I were a betting man, I would say is because the run of Eric Larson wasn't very well received, which means that Lagoon Boy was not very well received. Now that goes into the Teen Titans special, which I want to say was written by Chuck Dixon, although I could be wrong, but it was Teen Titans East. And Teen Titans East was designed to take the normal Teen Titans team and then create like a secondary team that would basically function in a different capacity, but would still follow the Teen Titans brand, would still have teenage superheroes. But basically you had this new Teen Titans team that was formed, and then like right off the bat, they go against the kids of Trigon who basically wreck them all. And that's the experience that Lagoon Boy's talking about when he talks about hearing their screams and different things like that, being shot with a laser, and so on and so forth. That's what he's enduring here. He's constantly doing it to himself. And the reason why is because with a laser passed through him and put him in a comatose state, so on and so forth, his idea is if he endures being shot enough times, eventually it won't affect him anymore. And so the screams will stop in his head. That's the kind of treatment he's going with here. Now, that's the important thing about Sanctuary, is Sanctuary does not really seem to have any true doctors, which is to say, it's not as though they go in there and then they're diagnosed and then they say, here's what you need to do to fix your problem. Instead, they go in there and they're just kind of left to their own devices and they stay however long they need to stay until that trauma is essentially remedied, which, as you guys can imagine, can cause all kinds of different problems. And that's what Lagoon Boy endures, is constantly being shot with lasers. Now, of course, there comes a point where he simply says, stop, I'll come back tomorrow, and we'll continue the process again. But that's basically what he's doing, is literally injuring himself under the idea that eventually he'll become immune to it, or it won't faze him anymore, it won't bother him anymore. And the belief is that when that time comes, he won't have to worry about the voices in his head or anything like that. Now, switching over to Wally West, things are a lot more straightforward here. One of the things to bear in mind when it comes to classic Wally West is that he's been stuck in the Speed Force all this time. When the events of New 52 happened and everything was rebooted and classic Wally West was nowhere to be found, when Rebirth started, DC answered the question of where's classic Wally West been by saying he's been stuck in the Speed Force, and Barry Allen was finally able to bring him out by remembering him. And so ever since then, classic Wally has been getting his memories back slowly and steadily, and that means he's been learning about his children, Jai and Iris. He's been learning about Linda Park, the fact that they were married. But that's not the case now. By whatever manner and whatever means, means, presumably due to the actions of Dr. Manhattan, everything Wally West knows has been changed. And so where you can't just run to Linda Park and say, hey, we're married and we have kids, and expect her to kind of be on board like, oh, that makes sense. That's not going to happen. And so what he's been doing here is basically trying to like figure out, or at least try to find somebody to kind of cope with his existing environment. And so what we end up finding out is that what he's been doing is basically recreating his life inside of Sanctuary, where he has Linda Park who runs out to greet him, where he has his kids, Jai and Iris. He has the life he always wanted. And so one of the cool things is that he and his kids, the Tornado Twins, actually end up facing off against Captain Cold. And that's kind of like reliving the memories, reliving the way things used to be. Now, in reality, this is a good way of coping with things, but I feel like what Tom King is hitting at here is that this can be a very, very dangerous thing. And the reason why is because there is such a thing as getting lost. In any scenario that we're in, there's only ever two circumstances that we face: the reality as things are and the way that we would like them to be. And oftentimes, if we allow ourselves to get stuck in the way that we would like them to be, we get trapped there, we never fully recover. Like we never come back from there, right? Because I mean, like, why would you? It's like Star Trek, the Star Trek Generations, right? While the movie was terrible, they had this really, really cool concept called the ribbon. And basically, if it passed over you, you were yanked into a place called the Nexus. And you essentially repeated the best moments of your life, presumably for all eternity, or at least for however long your body held out. But if you were given the opportunity to relive the best moments of your life, why wouldn't you take that opportunity? And if you were given that opportunity and you did take it, what's to say you wouldn't get lost? And that's the issue with Wally West here. Wally West is living in a life that doesn't exist anymore. And living in this life that doesn't exist anymore, he won't want to leave, or at least it seems like he won't want to leave. And so in response to that, how can you yank somebody from perfection? How can you yank somebody from absolute tried and true happiness? This is the life he always wanted. He has his wife, he has his kids, he has the things that he lost that he wants back so dear. But the problem is that he's not facing the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is that his family's basically gone. And maybe it's one of these things where if it had been allowed to play out, that Tom King would have written it out in such a way to where Wally West would have just been able to say goodbye. I have to let you go. Now remember, Wally was told by Professor Zoom, he was told, hey, like, your kids are alive. Like, your kids are alive and they exist out there somewhere. So Wally is most likely on the hunt for them, or will be on the hunt for them at some point in time. But it's one of the interesting things, because the way this is written, it almost seems to kind of ignore that idea, right? Like, it almost seems to kind of ignore the notion that Wally's aware of his children's true existence, because then the question would be, if he does know they exist, why isn't he out finding them? So again, these little tidbits are kind of, a little bit of conflict going on there, but nothing outrageous. It's just kind of Wally living this life that ultimately it doesn't seem like he'll want to let go of. Now for Booster Gold, his segment of the story is a lot more straightforward. He's a guy trying to figure out what in the heck is going on. But here's the issue with this. So Booster Gold has always had two parts to himself, right? Like, there's the Booster Gold as the hero and the Booster Gold who's a liar. The Booster Gold from, like, as he exists, like, he's basically a con man, right? Like, he took technology from the future, traveled to the past, and is like, I'm the greatest hero in the future, and then just kind of purported that idea in the present day. The issue with that is that Booster's been living with that lie the entire time. And so that's kind of the thing. Like when he goes through, we kind of get this explanation of what's going on with regards to the nature of Sanctuary, in the sense that when this issue first opened up and Booster Gold first arrived at Sanctuary, he was met by basically what appeared to be Ma and Pa Kent and Lana Lang. Now, the inclusion of them is not accidental. Sanctuary itself was built using the technology of Superman, the ingenuity of Batman, and the hope of Wonder Woman. But when it comes to the character of Ma and Pa Kent and Lana Lang, they hold a very particular place in DC Comics, not just with Superman, but with DC Comics as a whole. And what I mean by that is that Jonathan and Martha Kent kind of represent the greater wisdom, the people who kind of impose these pearls of wisdom on us. That was the nature of Jonathan and Martha Kent, helping Superman become more than just a guy with powers and become something that represented hope for humanity. Lana Lang plays a very important role because she was the first person to recognize or to learn the powers of Superman and taught him how to use them. So she was very much kind of like a younger guiding hand for Clark Kent, as opposed to the pearls of wisdom that were instilled on him by Jonathan and Martha Kent. But with the nature of Sanctuary itself, what it does is it basically changes your environment using Kryptonian crystals, and then allows you to use whatever you need to do in order to get past things. For Booster Gold, he's facing himself. That Booster himself has a lot of unresolved issues here. Now, these aren't really delved into too far in this. It's just kind of like, hey, basically everything you do screws up. Why? Well, because you're not doing it for good reasons. You're doing it because you're trying to prove that you're an actual hero. And that's the nature of Booster, and those are those two diametrically opposing views that his character represents. On one half, you have Booster Gold who wants to be the hero, and on the other half, you have Booster Gold doing everything to show he's a hero, when in reality, he's he's not. He's a con man. He doesn't think like a good guy. He thinks like, how can I prove that I'm a hero by doing this? He's basically trying to fix what's not broken. And so what that does is it creates all kinds of problems for his character. Now, before any of this goes on, before we really get any, huge explanation on what's happening with these guys, suddenly alarms start going off. And when they do, Lagoon Boy's killed. He's one of the people that's killed. Wally races out only to find that, of course, Red Arrow, Arsenal, whatever you want to call him, Roy Harper, is basically dead. And the person overlooking it all is Harley Quinn. And Harley Quinn cracks Wally West over the head with a mallet and kills Wally West. And so it's kind of like, okay, well then Harley Quinn, of course, was the one who killed Wally, presumably is the one who seems to have killed everybody else. It's kind of intriguing and it's kind of interesting because we don't really know exactly what direction things are going. And it's one of these scenarios where it's kind of like vantage point, right? Like all these things are happening, but we're looking at it from different perspectives, trying to figure out who's ultimately responsible for the death of all these characters. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.